Hey, good day everybody. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Last week we started kind of walking through Romans chapter 12 verses 9 through 21. I'm just going through verse by verse through this section because it's so rich. If you missed last week, you can dial up last week's sermon. Otherwise, we're picking up today with verse 13. And verse 13 reads, "Contribute to the needs of the saints. Extend hospitality to strangers." So far in this passage, Paul has doubled or coupled and tripled these admonitions or sayings together. He has not put disparate things together. So he's not told us to eat our ice cream and do our taxes. Instead, he's told us things like brush your teeth and go to bed on time. We know that these things that he's telling us go together. They are connected, they're intertwined. Like his example of putting patience and perseverance together. So when we read, "Contribute to the needs of the saints and extend hospitality to strangers," we know that those things go together. Every once in a while, a well-meaning person will express the sentiment, "Well, we have to take care of our own first." That sentiment could be about one's household, or it could be about church members versus non-church members. It could be about our own country first. But the fact is that Paul links together the tending to both the needs of the saints and the hospitality to strangers. Both tending to the saints and extending hospitality to the stranger require getting outside of our own self. They require getting outside of our own interests and putting others before us. To take care of only the saints and not the stranger is to forget that God reached out to us while we were strangers. To forget that all Gentiles needed to be grafted into God's covenant would be to short-circuit all of our impulses of being generous as God is generous. To fail extending hospitality to strangers would begin to decay our most basic understanding of grace. Without grace, none of this is even worth talking about. Remembering the nature of grace and what it means to be recipients of God's grace is going to be important for the next verse as well. Verse 14 reads, "Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them." Well, while writing these expositions of these verses, there was a long pause in the typing when I got to this verse. I had to pause simply to stop and reflect upon this verse in my own life. I needed to consider the degree to which I could speak to this verse with any integrity at all. The New Testament is clear about this teaching. The degree of difficulty of this verse seems to be of no matter to those who recorded it. Again, the Apostle Paul is not making anything up here. I imagine Paul got this teaching from Jesus himself when the two of them met. Jesus not only taught us to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you from the Sermon on the Mount, but Jesus lived this teaching. He never backed down from this teaching. When they came to arrest Jesus, he went peacefully. When they reviled him and beat him, Jesus never retaliated. When they hung him on a cross, Jesus prayed for the executioners. The most consistent witness of this ethic of love that I know of in current day comes from the black church. Hi, my sermon needed a little help here, so I'm intervening. The black church is an important witness to me because it is a miracle that black people brought to America by Christians and bought in America by Christians. It's a monumental witness and miracle that black people did not turn in a wholesale way against the faith of their captors and oppressors. That black people accepted the gospel can only be for one reason. The black church had an authentic and living encounter with the risen Jesus. And that this Jesus had something far more to say in the scriptures and through the scriptures that was far more than what slaveholder religion was telling them. Only the truth and power of God can account for this. Only grace in its purest form can account for this. That blacks accepted the gospel is a miracle, and I find the existence of the black church a testimony to this verse. Another aspect of this one verse that stands out to me is the idea that no one ever truly reconciled with their enemies through violence. We can ask whether an ethic such as love really works at all, but we have to be careful about what we mean by work. Are we talking about just alleviating symptoms in the short term, or are we talking about a more long-term effect of changing hearts and minds? I don't know that anyone has come up with a power greater to change hearts and minds of people than God, and God's love specifically. More often than not, a conversion or an alignment to the Christian faith that comes out of fear or violence is only temporary if it's authentic in the first place at all. Okay, I realize that I'm talking in grand historical sweeps, and maybe you're having trouble connecting what you can do as an individual to live out this verse. Well, if I've been too lofty or dreamy, let's just start by not posting things on the internet that say, "You're stupid if you don't believe like me." Stop trolling people or retaliating at people online. Let's just start by doing nice for someone who's been mean to you. That's one way to live out this verse. According to the scripture, it may be progress if we simply refrain from cursing people. You know, for a lot of us, that's a good start. All right, let's just commit to not cursing other people. And the goal in trying to live out this verse isn't an attempt to change the other person. The goal is just to get you and me a little bit looser in our locked-in worldviews. It's just to get us, create a little bit of space for God to improve us. The goal is to allow God to interrupt the automatic reactions that we have to people. And the goal is for us to become more Christ-like. Not to win our argument, not to be right all the time, but to be more Christ-like, even if no one else is. Okay, we're on to the next verse. Verse 15. It's one of my favorites. It reads, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep." You know, on a good day, I will allow this verse to help form who I am, especially when I'm sitting with people in the role of a pastor. This verse is most of what you need to know when you all are providing pastoral care to one another. Oftentimes we struggle with what to say to people who are in need or in pain. Well, this verse gives us some good instructions. It's about being available to someone without needing to change them or manipulate them, but just to let them be. Rejoice with those who rejoice. You know, I think we've mostly got that part down. That's the easier half of this verse. The exception is when someone is excited about something and they come to you and say something like, "Oh, I'm so excited that my child is going to college." And our response is, well, when my child left for college, I just cried and cried. Well, that's about you. It's not about them. Let's listen to them and rejoice with those who rejoice. Keep whatever you're thinking to yourself and let the other person be excited. But mostly we have trouble with the second half of this verse. We have trouble with weeping with those who weep. Not all the time, but very often I see people I'm with people, talking with people who are upset over a diagnosis or a death in the family or a dilemma that they're facing. And even their best of friends are tempted to try and talk that person out of what they're feeling. There are several problems with trying to talk somebody out of what they're feeling, generally speaking. And for the rest of this verse, I'm not talking about extraordinary circumstances. I'm not talking about mental illness. I'm just talking about the kind of emotional life that's normal to everyone. Well, the first problem with trying to talk somebody out of what they're feeling is we're simply not listening when we do this. We might be hearing, but we're not seeking to understand the person. We're just hearing enough to try to solve the problem and make ourselves feel better at the expense of the other person and move on. It takes real effort to sit and listen without any easy answers and to simply say to someone, I'm sorry. I wish things were different. The second problem with not weeping with those who weep is that offering an answer too soon is akin to saying, your feelings are wrong, you're wrong, and here's how you can get right again. That rarely helps anyone. If anything, it just makes them angry. Thirdly, and this is a lesson that I'm learning late in life, and as one person put it, you can't make a bean grow faster by pulling on it. Some things just take time. The internal resolution of feelings takes time. We all take a little time in digging down and finding the inner resources we need to meet a challenge. And very often, God takes time with us. To refuse someone they're weeping is perhaps to get in the way of something that God is doing in the life of that person. Now, this is a big subject. People get PhDs in how to counsel people. And please connect with me more if you want to take me up on this point. But most of the time, if we can put ourselves and our feelings aside for a moment, then we can sit with someone, we can rejoice with those who rejoice, and we can weep with those who weep. Well, that's all the wisdom I can muster for today. I'm going to continue working with this passage and talk about it some more next week. God bless you and have a faithful week.